It's our turn, episode number 70, Megagaming. In this episode, Mark and I talk about the games we've played recently, and I interview John Cleaveland and Leslie Loy about West Coast Megagames.
This is the Dice Tower Network, adding games to your wish list since 2005.
Hosting for this episode is generously provided by our fantastic supporters on Patreon.com. If you'd like to help us out by pledging $1 per month or more, please visit patreon.com/OurTurnPodcast. Every dollar helps us to keep this show going strong. Hi, and welcome back to Our Turn. I am Cathy Ford, and today, filling the guest host chair is my wonderful husband, Mark Ford. Mark, welcome back to Our Turn.
Thank you, my darling. It's a pleasure to be back on the show.
So normally when we start the show, we talk about what we've been playing lately, but Mark and I realized before we started recording that we've been playing games together, but it's been the same games. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two games that we've played recently, but they're going to be the same games, and we'll give you our different perspectives on them. So we're going to start off with Star Trek Ascendancy, the Borg Assimilation expansion. I have talked about Star Trek Ascendancy on the show before, and it is, in my opinion, the best Star Trek board game that I've seen to date. I've only heard good reviews about it, and we bought it and played it, and we played, we also at the same time bought the Cardassian and Ferengi expansions, and so we've played a 5-player game of this, which, do you remember how long that game went, Mark? Was it 3 or 4 hours?
Oh, Lord. It was 4 hours if it was a minute.
Yeah, but it was fun. It went really quickly, and it is a table hog. This game is definitely a table hog. Now, this game is designed to be played with a minimum of 3 players, but we discovered that the Borg Assimilation expansion adds the Borg as a non-player character, which then allows for solo and 2-player play. So we decided to go ahead and stop waiting for other people to come over and play and sit down and play this game and try it out ourselves with the Borg Assimilation expansion. Mark, what did you think of the expansion?
Well, the Borg Assimilation has, of course, the high point of being the single nastiest bad guy that Star Trek has ever come up with. And yes, I do know about Species 8472, I think is what it was. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Borg. The whole idea of assimilation rather than conquering just scares the living bejesus out of me. So, yeah, Borg are number 1 with a bullet on my Star Trek bad guy list. And in some ways, this expansion does give you the feel of the Borg actually hunting in the neighborhood. It's got a few quirks that can turn it, if you're not paying attention, can make it too easy. You have to remember that the Borg are aggressive, and so every move they will make will be directly targeted at one of the players. Mm-hmm. And they're very powerful, so that gives them a lot of dice. That's right. And we didn't do that, so we had time to build up our forces before, as the eloquent Mr. Riker says, engaging the Borg. So what happens is, if you've had too much time to build up, the Borg are a pretty easy target. Right. But I think the game is designed to have the contact with the Borg occur much earlier than it did in our game, when you're not as well prepared. Because, right, as playing the Romulans, of course, typecasting aside, by the time we made contact with the Borg, I had, 2 full-strength battle fleets and several upgrades to my weapons. So I just came in, blasted away, and, lo and behold, dead cube. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's supposed to work that way. Yeah, no, I don't think so either. And I was playing the Federation and doing my Explorer bit.
I think that the mistake we made was we put each of our home worlds at the edges of the table, and we put the Borg at the far edge of the table. And I think that just gave everything too much space. And so it gave all of us, all three of us, the Borg included, time to build up. But the Borg had the rule that only one Borg cube could be in a system at a time. And so that kind of gave them a bottleneck, but I'm not entirely sure we were playing that correctly. What do you think?
I agree. The Borg ships would have made contact much earlier than they did in our game if we had done it correctly as to making a beeline for the closest homeworld. The rules state that you should put the Borg equidistant between the players and recommend about 18 inches. Our table won't do that because it's probably, it's just not that big. So that's why we had the placement we did. I think it was more the case of not being as aggressive with planet placement as we should have been. And because they would have come in on us much earlier, because until they connect to one player's network of planets, they get bottlenecked. Mm-hmm. And if you hit them early enough and can take advantage of that bottleneck, well, that's great for the players. But if they get hooked up before you get ready, they're going to come eat your lunch.
Yeah, I think this game, too, is designed to have... I mean, yes, you can play it two-player. This game is not designed to be a two-player game. And the factions are designed to go at one another like they do in the show. So, for example, the Federation and Romulans, until Deep Space Nine, pretty late in Deep Space Nine, the Romulans were never an ally in anything. They were always the troublemakers that were trying to manipulate everybody and everything around them. They finally came in on the Dominion War, but it took a lot of persuasion and effort to get them to join the side of the Federation and the Klingons and that. And the Romulan faction in this game is designed with that in mind. All of the factions have asymmetrical player powers, including the Borg, and they're all designed around how they're depicted in the Star Trek series.
Well, that being said, yes, it was a little weird for my Romulans to be allied with your Federation. But all that being said, I think this is a great expansion. It has the potential to be a wonderful expansion. We just need to play test it a little more thoroughly and a little more in the spirit of the game. As a general whole, the mechanics are solid. The powers for the Borg are solid. The win condition for a Borg win it has the potential to sneak up on you if you're not very careful. All in all, I give this a 4. It's a solid expansion. I think that with a little more playtime and a little more, shall we say, assimilation into our game, that I think it can eventually meet up with our original rating of a 5 for Star Trek Ascendancy.
Yes, definitely. And like I was saying, I think this game just needs more players. It is not designed to be a 2-player game. And yes, the Borg expansion does allow for a 2-player game, but it's not the best use of this game. The best playing of this game. This game is designed to have 3 or more players. And I think that needs to be in addition to the Borg NPC. Because then you're dealing with all of the different faction powers and personalities that are so well represented in this game. And the Borg personality is represented well in this game as well. So I definitely give this a 4. I think it augments the game. I think it has the potential to improve the game. We just need to play it with 5 players plus the Borg now.
I have to agree.
So, yeah. So I'm trying to arrange a play date with some of our friends that live real close by. There are 3 of them and then 2 of us, so that would be perfect. So it's just everybody's busy schedules are keeping that from happening right now. All right.
Well, forgive me if I misquote Jaws, but I think we're going to need a bigger boat.
Yep, definitely. So that is Star Trek Ascendancy, the Borg Assimilation expansion. All right. Our next game was actually given to us by somebody that lives here locally and wanted to donate some games to us for the convention that we're working on putting together. So we put this on our game space of temporal insufficiency in the meantime so we could give it a try out. And it's called Dairenji. I had never heard of this game before. It apparently came out in 2012. And the designer is Tate Wu. And the artists are Tate Wu and Haiyu Zhao. And the publisher is Sunrise Tornado Game Studio. I haven't heard of that one before. Have you, Mark?
Not at all. Not at all. And the Asian influence on this game is very apparent from the get-go.
Yes, definitely. I got to start off by saying that this is a card game, and the card art is beautiful, and the card quality is surprisingly amazing. I mean, it's good. They don't seem to be plastic coated like a standard deck of playing cards, but they're good, solid, sturdy cards. I don't foresee them getting dinged up much in play. Do you?
Not at all. It's well crafted. The only complaint I have about the game components itself is, and please, anybody who is out there who is designing a game, if English is not your first language, please find an English speaker to write the English version of your rules. A lot of the commentary that was in the rule sheet, yes, it's only just a double-sided sheet, was confusing enough that we had a couple of false starts getting the game started.
Yeah, but that can happen with just about any game as far as learning the rules and things like that. Now, you described this game as Go Fish meets
Clue.
Meets Clue, that's right. Because this is a social deduction game. At the start of the game, you take out, at random, and nobody looks at them, you take out a location card, a weapon card, and a target card. And what you're trying to do is investigate a potential assassination that you've heard about. You're trying to figure out who's going to get hit, what kind of weapon's going to be used, and where the assassination is going to take place. And you take those 3 cards, nobody looks at them, you stick them under the game box, and then you proceed to play. Now, we just played this 2-player. This game can be played up to 6 players. It only takes about 30 minutes to play, and you play until there are 8 sets on the table. Now, there are 3 versions of each type of card. So the targets are numbered 1 through 6, and there's 6 different characters on the cards. But there are 3 copies of each of the targets. There are 3 copies of each of the weapons, which are numbered 1 through 5. And then there are 3 copies of the locations, which are also numbered 1 through 5. So during gameplay, this game is semi-cooperative as well. So during gameplay, you're exchanging cards back and forth, kind of in a Go Fish style, where you say, Mark, do you have any 2s? Or Mark, can you give me a location? And he can, or he doesn't have to give me a card. If he gives me a card, then great. I put down, if I have a set to put down, I put down the set face down. And then there's a step a little bit later in each turn where you turn over the top card to let people know, you turn it over as a clue to let people know what should be in that set. Now, you can add what's called a suspect card to a set. So you've only got 2. So you're trying to throw your opponents off the scent of where you think you're going with it. Once you have 8 sets on the table, they don't have to all be in front of one individual player. It can be 8 between the 2 of us or 8 among 6 players. Then you each get a pencil and paper and try and deduce what you think is under the game box. Who's going to get hit, where it's going to happen, and what kind of weapon is going to be used. And if working together you can guess correctly, then yay, the group wins. If you don't guess all 3 components correctly, the game wins. Is that accurate, Mark?
Well, yes, but if you determine between the group all three of the variables, then everybody scores points to come up with the actual winner. So it's kind of okay, you got to meet this threshold. You've got to stop the assassination. And then whoever did the best gets the win. One other thing you didn't hit was when you're picking out that first set of cards to go underneath, then you take the remaining 13 cards. You get one copy of each weapon, location, and suspect, or target rather, and you shuffle them all together. And then you pass each player 2 or 3, depending on how many players are playing, cards. So everybody knows either 2 or 3 of the wrong answers. So you have to deduce the rest of them from that. And say if someone puts down a set, what they claim to be a set of 3, but you have one of those cards in your hand, you pretty much know that that's going to be a false lead as opposed to a real lead. So it's complicated, but not terribly meaty, if that makes any sense.
Now, I've never seen a strictly card-based social deduction game. There was no board involved in this. Have you?
No. This is the first time I've seen something. Either social deduction games, so far from what I've seen, either are cards and tokens or a board game like the original Clue, which is probably, I guess you could say, the granddaddy or grandmama of all social deduction games. But this is the first one I've seen that only uses cards.
So what is your rating of this game?
It may improve with more players or more plays, but right now I have to give it a 3. There are too many bugs in it to make it solid. But it's not a complete and total waste of time.
Mm-hmm. I would have to agree. Like we said with Star Trek Ascendancy, some games just aren't meant to be played 2-player, even though they can be played 2-player. And I suspect that this might be another one of those games. So I am reserving final judgment as well for when we can get this to the table with 3 or 4 or 5 people and see how it plays then. I wouldn't be opposed to practicing it a little bit more so we can explain it quickly when we do sit down with a group of people. But right now I'd say it's probably sitting at about a 3.5 for me because I did enjoy the artwork and the components, and I do think this game has potential. Like I said, though, but it needs more players. I think it's designed for more players, and it just tends to suffer a little bit with just 2 players.
Well, for me, gameplay is the thing. And, I can enjoy a game for its components. I can enjoy a game for its theme. But if it clunks during play, that's why I've got it about a half point lower than yours.
Sure. All right. That's what we've been playing. We have set up and been referring to and rating games by our own rating scale. Here's how we are using this scale. 5. Buy this now. 4. A good solid game. 3. Decent with some bugs. 2. Has great potential as kindling. And 1. Give me back the time I spent playing it. Back in episode number 64, my husband Mark and I did a review of our experience playing in a mega game called Watch the Skies. Today, for the interview, I'm happy to welcome 2 people from West Coast Megagames, the organization that put on the Watch the Skies event, to the show. John T. Cleaveland is the founder and lead of West Coast Megagames, and Leslie Loy is the outreach coordinator. John and Leslie, welcome to Our Turn.
Hey, well, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's start off with the basics. For those who have never experienced one, what is a mega game?
Leslie, I'll let you take this one.
Okay, this is where I tend to wax a little more philosophical. I think a mega game is best described as a large scale event. So lots of people getting together, playing on teams with and against other teams is the most simple way that I've found of describing a mega game, because there's so many other variables that can define and sort of make a mega game. They can run for as little as 2 to 3 hours and as long as 10 to 12 hours. So length is not necessarily the piece, but the piece is more just that there's lots of people coming together to play games and that they're playing on teams.
Now, when you did Watch the Skies in Sacramento, approximately how many people were at that game?
There were 82 participants, and there were 24 support personnel. So we had more than 100 people actively interacting with the game environment.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. There were a lot of people there. And yeah, I know I put in over 5,000 steps at that game that day.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
That's an awesome analytic. I would love to have the analytics of how much movement, I never even thought about that. I'm all about tracking what happens during the game. So.
Yeah, I was playing a scientist on Team India and going back and forth between the main room and the science room. And I would do that 2 or 3 times in a turn. And because I would go in there and do some science stuff for a little bit, and then I come back out and tell my team what I was doing, and they get all excited about it and give me some new orders, and I go back. And yeah, it was lots of fun. So how is this different from like a tabletop RPG or a traditional LARP experience?
So I think the biggest difference between tabletop and mega games is that the interpersonal diplomacy is really at the center of the gameplay in every game that I have played or run. The closest analog for most people in the board gaming world is diplomacy, which is rarely played these days because of the length of time or the ending of friendships that it can cause. But that element of the human contact, the communication playing into the game is much more prevalent than in most tabletop games, especially the Euro games that we currently are moving towards. And then in the LARP scenario, actually having it tied down to the game system to a fair amount makes it less LARPy. But the players, I find the player experience actually feels much more like a LARP, because you can't necessarily track all these interactions going on simultaneously, so it's hard without looking at post-game analysis to tell what actually interfaced with the game system and where. And so you get that LARP feel, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when I have interacted with LARPs, I find that LARPs fairly regularly don't interface as much with the game system, or if it does, it's kind of separate from the interactions. Whereas everything in a mega game is supposed to come directly back to the mechanics in some way or another.
Yeah, I can see that. So West Coast Megagames currently puts on 2 games, Watch the Skies and Sengoku. Tell me about those.
So Watch the Skies is a geopolitical simulation based on XCOM, so it focuses on real-world politics with an alien invasion possibly happening on top. And I say invasion loosely because some games, the aliens are not necessarily invading Earth for their own benefit. They're trying to come on nicely, more or less, and other games they're not. But humans tend to see that an invasion either way, right? So that's an interesting game. Players play as teams of nations. There's a few outlier teams like the media teams and the UN team. And more or less, you're just playing out the attempt to get the best ending situation for your country. There's not necessarily a concrete end goal for most of the teams. There are goals, but there's not like a win condition, which is what board gamers find a little jarring. In Sengoku, it is 1552, right at the crux of the Japanese Warring States period. The shogunate is particularly weak, and so you play as ninja. You play as samurai clans, kind of trying to solidify your region, and then you have the end goal of being named the next shogun. So that kind of drives the gameplay and people trying to work together. Your teams are about 4 and 5 in that game, and you've got Sohi warrior and monk clans. There's 2 of those in the game that kind of are isolated, but they're right by the capital city. So if the daimyos are getting too much power, they don't necessarily want a centralized government, so they can come in and step in to be a major power player. You've got the samurai clans, which are, again, trying to solidify their own region and then possibly the country. And then we have played around with having ninja clans, but that is probably going to be pulled out of the next game that we run on that. And then we are running a third game, or we're working on a third game right now called The World Turned Upside Down, which is Revolutionary War period, right before the start. Yeah, that's the one we're doing in July. So that's right before the start of the Revolutionary War, and your teams are of the 15 colonies, because it includes the Canadian colonies. And then you have England, which is a unified team, but you have the king, the Whigs, and the Tories all represented. So there can be conflict within that team very easily.
Interesting. Wow. Did you write these games yourself?
Our role within the Megagame community right now is not independent development. We work with the Megagame makers in England and currently a group called Ironmark Games in New York. And we do modifications of games and improvements to how they look and feel. That's all of our stuff. So all the assets that you played with were all original West Coast Megagames assets. But the rule sets themselves were originally written by a gentleman named Jim Wallman, or a gentleman named Stefan, I believe, is the original writer of The World Turned Upside Down. We do have 2 mega games in development locally, but with our own games, we tend to take a lot more time than we do to adapt a different rule set.
I imagine it takes a lot of playtesting to get these things right.
Yeah, so the mega game makers have been doing mega games for, I think, since 60-something. Leslie, do you have the actual year on that?
I don't have the actual year. They came out of wargaming, so I think that it morphed out of that, but I don't have the exact dates now.
So these have been around for a while.
Yeah, they've been doing it more in a club environment up until 2014. And Shut Up and Sit Down did a video going into one of their games, Watch the Skies, and that kind of went viral. And so a lot of people latched on to Watch the Skies, and it started becoming an international thing, which is why you see Watch the Skies so many different places. And then groups that ran Watch the Skies, which was not us at the time, wanted to run other games. We ran Sengoku, which is another Jim Wallman design. And so you've got all these mega game groups, and we all kind of have a different flavor of each games. Watch the Skies is the one that pretty much is universally somebody. If you run a mega game, you have a version of Watch the Skies that you run, whereas all the rest of the games are either one-offs or two-offs, or maybe 3 groups have done their own thing. And you're starting to build this community in the last 4 years. So in 2014, there was maybe 2 or 3 international games run and developed. Our first one was in 2015, of January 2015. And now you have a distinct different flavor in different areas. So there's a distinctly Australian mega game community. There's a English mega game community. There's definitely a North American mega game community. So it's interesting, and it's developing.
Nice. So we have an international audience. If people want to find out about a local mega games organization similar to yours, is there like a central place where they can go to look and find something local?
So there isn't a clean place, but there are several places to look. There is a Discord server for the international community, which we can give you the link to. And that's becoming, as of about 2 months ago, a central place. The mega game makers themselves track a lot of different things that are going on and post that to a certain extent. And then there's a North American group emerging called the Megagame Coalition that is actively trying to group groups together. So it's a group of groups trying to coordinate, the ability to share rule sets, talk about different games that are happening, and really pull this community into one. And Leslie's actually heavily involved in that, so I'll let her take over.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people are interested in finding out about what's going on, the first good place to start is either on that Discord server, and if people aren't on Discord, there is a public Facebook group just for the Megagame makers, and people tend to, even if they're not affiliated directly with the Megagame makers, tend to connect there first and figure out what's going on. One of the sort of core members of the Megagame makers, Dave, has spent years developing a database and tracking people's games and trying to keep a pretty accurate calendar of various Megagames that are happening around the world. And you can find him and find out about that also through that Facebook page. He's just done phenomenal work also in collecting over the last 25 years or so just data on player responses to games and what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. So they've done a really good job of just doing the analytics on Megagames, which is a piece that I find really intriguing at times. So
bless the data collectors.
Yeah, no, he's doing phenomenal work. And I think it's difficult because if you just type in Megagames in Google, for example, you get such a hodgepodge of different things. And so having some direction is really helpful because there are lots of little pockets of groups, even in the United States. This is one of the things that I'm finding all around the country of like a group who decided to run a Megagame and didn't even really know how to connect necessarily to the Megagame community because defining a Megagame can be really challenging, and then who's part of the community. So there are all these, every once in a while we'll catch wind that there's like a group at this college running a Megagame, or there's a little group down in Denver, so there, and then people are like, wait, there are other people running Megagames. And then there are some groups that are doing this pretty ongoingly. So it's kind of nice that anybody who wants to and puts their time and energy can make it happen. That's a little bit of the picture that happens when you think about that. So
neat. So what got the two of you interested in playing and producing Megagames? It's a specific niche.
It is a specific niche. So my background is event coordination and logistics support. So I used to work at a small college doing something like that. So I already had the skill set of setting up spaces and that type of stuff. And then I'm a video gamer. Specifically, I like long form, large strategy games. 4 to 6 people playing for 8 to 12 hours. The type of thing it's really hard to get people to do. So I was already kind of primed to do that. I'm also a GM for Pathfinder and D&D 3.5, but I never liked spending 80 hours producing a campaign for 4 people. It always felt a little too small. And as I'm getting older, I always wondered if I was, just frittering my life away in fantasy environments, right? So my friend in 2014 said, here's this video about this large game that you would love. And I completely ignored her. And then she said one sentence to me. I would go to London to play this game. And I'm going, why would you fly to London to play a game? What possible game could there be out there that you would want to fly to London? She's not a LARPer, which would be the only thing that would cross my mind. And so I looked into it. And it was intriguing, but not necessarily what I thought it would be. So I went and found the rule set. And in one weekend, I went from skeptic to having a website out for Sacramento Megagames and a registration page live with none of the logistics handled whatsoever. And
how long before your first game was pulled off? After that? That
was Labor Day 2014, and the game was January 3rd, 2015.
Nice.
And that was Sengoku.
Wow, that's fast.
And my thought was these rules are really compelling. The concept here was really compelling, but the presentation was not something I would ever be able to sell to an American audience because it was definitely for a wargaming community or a community of people who were there for the experience and not necessarily there for it looking pretty. So I set out slightly modifying the rule set and trying to update the map, the presentation, all of that, which has kind of become the staple of WCM, is nicely presented. I also attempted to set out and make the chaos less chaotic. However, that is a much bigger challenge than I ever anticipated when I first was starting out. And from there, it kind of just snowballed. That first game was about 50% people connected to me directly because there wasn't a West Coast group of people who were interested or even knew about Megagames at the time. And the game after that was about 25% people directly connected to me, and it had grown to about 60 participants. And now we're at about 80 participants.
Wow.
And maybe like 10% directly connected to me. So
wow, that's incredible. And how about you, Leslie?
Well, just watching John work on the mega game sort of on the sideline, and I have a background in conference planning, also a little bit of event stuff and marketing, and was watching him and said, "Oh, I'm willing to help out with some of these things." And I'm a gamer who doesn't identify as a gamer because I'm horrible with rules, and so I enjoy mega games in part because they could be, if presented in the right way, really appealing to people who just are really interested in a different kind of experience, or who enjoy interacting with people, or enjoy debate. I mean, like there's so much rich potential in a mega game if it's presented in the right way to attract different kinds of people. And so for me, my ongoing interest is how to get different kinds of people in a room to interact and to have this experience. And I think, especially this last Watch This, guys, I had a moment where I was sitting on the stage watching everybody and just going like, there are 80 plus people in this room who saw something about Watch the Skies and showed up and had such just trust in showing up for this event. And I think that that's just really amazing. So that in itself is part of the reason that I just find myself really doing it, and probably why I've continued doing it. And I was at that first Sengoku for parts of it and just was really intrigued by watching all these people like show up for this really random, chaotic, sort of strange way of being in a game format. And, you know, when I picked up the rule book, I was really initially daunted by it because it just seemed like a lot to remember. And then understanding that everybody, right, but understanding also that everybody has their part and you're working as a team so that you could break it down once I could wrap my brain around that, then that was really helpful. And, yeah, there's mega games just for me can't be boring because you just never know what people are going to come up with or how they're going to strategize or what they can come up with as a solution in their imagination to a problem. So
yeah, I gotta say my one experience with Watch the Skies, I was not bored for a single second the entire time. The times that I had to spend in the lab where I was just basically sitting for 5 minutes, that was like a nice breather. I don't know if any of the other roles had that option, but for me, that was a nice breather. So I got to say, if you're an introvert and you're kind of worried about playing in a mega game, sign up for Watch the Skies and be a scientist. I had a great time. I was not bored for a single second. I was busy the whole time, and I felt like I was having an impact on the game.
Yeah, one of our experiences at this point is I almost can't say come have fun at a mega game. It's an experience. It's intense. It's enjoyable, but I don't know that players have fun. And then, like at the end of the game, it's not like they're going, man, that was the most fun experience. But then over the course of a week, even the players that didn't necessarily have fun or were frustrated, there's something that resonated for those players. And at this point, I think I have gone away from a game with only about 5 directly negative experiences out of all our games. There are people who have, like, I've only played one mega game, and I was absolutely diplomatically frustrated for 6 hours. But when it came to thinking about the game, it was highly enjoyable. I just wouldn't necessarily call it fun, you know, and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, my husband Mark had a similar experience in that he was the military commander for India who decided to be peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
And his problem was he wanted to find other ways to use the military and kept running into the rules.
Yep, and that's not built into the game because it's assumed to be happening underneath the simulation as opposed to via direct player agency, which, yep.
Right. So, but he has told me since then that he would absolutely play again. Absolutely. He loved it. He had a great time.
And
in hindsight.
that quality of it, I don't even know how to put my hands on, because normally when you're looking to promote an experience like that, you would be saying come for 8 hours of fun. And I hesitate myself to use that. It is an experience. It is enjoyable, but at the end of the day, you're tired, which is
absolutely, yeah.
But then there's this rich experience, like the best board game or the best video game, where you keep on coming back to it. And especially if you have people to talk to who were at the game, the emerging storylines, I find that debrief really helps to pull people together, but you can't explore everything that happened. And every conversation I have with a controller or a player, I am uncovering different pieces of the puzzle that led to the outcome of the game. And that, for me, is the most interesting part, because in real life, we're often left with this experience where we put our heart and soul into something, and at the end, we don't necessarily know why it turned out the way it turned out. But in this game environment, you can do the same thing and get reflected back to you how your actions, even ones that you didn't see play out during the game, affected one of the 30 to 80 people playing with you. Because each action, even the small ones, have a ripple effect. And when you have that many people in a room, even small things that aren't consequential in the rules can have a huge impact in the game environment.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I know, like I said, I was a scientist for Team India, but at the end of the game, I kind of felt like I was on two teams. I was on Team India, and I was working for the benefit of India, but I also felt like I was on the science team.
Mm-hmm.
And because the science team had kind of solidified into one team, regardless of where everybody was from, and we were working to make the situation better, as the science team.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I think that cohesion came a little late in the game.
Well, and
if we just had another couple of turns.
Well, the interesting thing is, because of timing issues in your game, we were on turn 8 of what was supposed to be 12 to 13. So what our experience is in every previous West Coast Megagames is turn 8 is the turning point. It's always about the turning point where something major has happened that forces people into camps. Whether it's camps of their own team, whether it's camps of diplomats versus the heads of state versus there's always these camps that form. And then those last 4 turns that we missed out on your game is kind of a resolution arc where you start to see those camps do their work. Really get invested in whatever their goals are. So we really missed, that end that we typically see at a West Coast Megagame event. And one of the big challenges that we are currently trying to solve fresh out of hiatus is how to ensure that the logistics of the game don't get in the way of the game. Because that was our biggest game. And we had some timing issues because we weren't actually prepared for the logistical increase, 80 players as opposed to 60 players represented. So that's what we're working on behind the scenes, is to clean up our logistical side so that the game can really flow and progress. But it's nice to see that the Megagame experience of a singular person isn't necessarily inhibited by that. You still have the Megagame experience, whether you play 8 turns, 12 turns. I think our longest was 14 turns. But we really want to clean that up so that as much information is visible. We're collecting analytics on the back end so we can actually present some data out of it, and the game flow is continuing regardless of the player size. And that's really dependent on our control team.
Right. Now, our game still went for, 12? No, not quite 12 hours. Maybe like 8 hours?
Yeah,
we started at, doors open at 9:30. Game officially started at about 10:30, and then we wrapped up at 7.
So you still played the full amount of time, but we had some turns that took extra time because of issues.
But the time flew by.
Oh, yeah. When you're in the game environment, you have no idea what the time is.
It's completely immersive.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, in hindsight, totally fun. Totally fun. I would absolutely do it again. But you're right. You do experience frustration or roadblocks. but that's the nature of the game.
Yep. And I think what's really important is you're given a path out of that. Yeah, at the end of the game, if you want to explore it, no matter what your experience was, you can always go and talk to the other guy that you were having a problem with at the end of the game, or during the debrief, you might see it. And you get that resolution if you want it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for West Coast Megagames?
Go ahead, Wes.
So we've always hosted our games in Sacramento. So we're going to Tempe next in April to run Watch the Skies, which is really exciting. And, figuring out the logistics of being in a new space and an environment that's a little bit more beyond our control will be interesting. So that's happening in April. And then we're also branching this year out into the educational sector. So we're going to be working at some schools this year and bringing mega games to kids and to teenagers in high schools, which is really exciting. So we'll see what happens with that. But in terms of recreational games, the next new game and the new game that will be here in Sacramento will be the July one, which is The World Turned Upside Down. And we're working on Sengoku in San Francisco, which will be a fundraiser event. So those things are still forming a little bit. And then there's also talk of a special Halloween game that will be zombie themed. So we've got a whole bunch of really fun things sort of scattered throughout the year for different players who are interested in different themes to come and experience mega games, or for people who just really enjoy playing mega games with us to come back and experience some more. So
how fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exciting for us because it's, we've worked really hard, John, and especially the crew that's been helping him out in the development and design department have really worked hard at fine-tuning Watch the Skies and Sengoku, and they've kind of been the babies that we've had around for the last 3 years. So it would be fun to add some new games to our repertoire and sort of see how it feels to run something different. The World Turned Upside Down is a much shorter game, for example. So that will be an afternoon experience, which is an interesting idea in itself for us. So it's exciting.
Now, do either of you do this full time, or do you have a full-time job and this is your hobby?
So West Coast Megagames is a 100% volunteer group, including me and Leslie. It does take an immense amount of time. When I started Sacramento Megagames, which is what became West Coast Megagames, my idea was that Megagames for any group takes a ton of work. Even if you get a fully realized rule set, it takes a ton of work to take from inception to reality, because you have to, make the materials, you have to set up your event, you have to do venue planning, all that. So I wanted to create a centralized group that did the rule game, or the rule book work, all of that, and the assets work that could travel to different areas. So say we got a sponsor, like our Tempe sponsor, Arizona Game Fair, that wanted to run a game, but they didn't necessarily want to do all the back-end stuff. We had already done that, so we'd take it to them. And this is our first situation where that's actually happening. That was my conception. It has not panned out in reality because, go figure, people just jump right in and they haven't worked out the logistics. They're usually about halfway through the process before they even consider logistics. So that didn't, nobody was contacting us for that. So then we went into the educational sector, right, to do that type of work. And that has become a full-time hobby, essentially. We had to take a hiatus in 2017 because of my work for the Navy. And there just wasn't enough of a team around to carry the work when I was gone. But at the moment, we are looking for more to build up our team of controllers, to build up our team of interested developers and designers, especially artists, which we don't have a lot of, so we can make the work for each individual in the back-end team of WCM really approachable, because at the moment it is overwhelming in the lead up to a game. And it is a hobby for us. There is the potential that it will not be long-term, but that's definitely where it's living right now.
Okay. So how can people connect with you if they want to learn more?
Leslie?
So, they're welcome to go to our website, which is wcmmegagames.com. We're also on Facebook. That's probably one of the great ways to get in touch with us. And Discord being the hot up-and-coming platform that it is, we do have a West Coast Megagames platform, which is just a really nice way to sort of interact with our budding community of players and controllers who are really interested in talking about their experiences in the games, and then also finding out about ways to get involved. So sometimes we have players who will play for a game and then they'll come be a controller, or they'll get involved in development and design. We do have people who help in development and design and then who want to also play at the same time. So there's like so many ways of being involved. And if you don't think of yourself as a developer or a designer or a gamer, in the way that I just don't think of myself always as a gamer, there's still lots of ways to get involved and be part of the experience. So if anyone's interested, they could just reach out to us, and we are pretty responsive because we're online all the time working on Megagames. So yeah, just reach out. Look for West Coast Megagames in the Google.
Nice. You're on Facebook. You already said that. How about Twitter or Instagram? Are you on either of those two?
Yep. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus for people who use that. Way back in the day, we had a Tumblr, which I think we've sort of let go at this point. But yeah, it's pretty easy, I think, to find us if you want to find us. And we're really happy to respond to people and interact and answer questions. So for that international community you're referring to, if there are groups that are interested in talking about running a mega game, because it would be expensive to probably come to a game that we're hosting. John had mentioned the Mega Game Coalition and the international mega game community. And one of the things that I really love is finding new people who want to put on mega games and connecting them with people who have experience, so that people are not always reinventing the wheel and getting overwhelmed in that way that John was talking about, which can happen easily. So for people interested in running mega games as well, or learning more about what that takes, they're welcome to reach out to us.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And we'll have links to all of this stuff in our show notes. So thank you both for coming on and sharing your passion about these mega games with us. I can't wait till I can participate in another one. This was absolutely a ton of fun. And I hope you'll come back and talk to us some more about any new games that you have coming up.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Cathy. All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah. If you're curious on how you can support the show, here are some ideas. If you'd like to support us financially, you can support us through Patreon at www.patreon.com/OurTurnPodcast. We've switched from pay per episode to pay per month. We also have a donation button on the site for anyone wanting to do a one-time donation. We have a lot of plans to improve our audio and expand the content we provide, but we need help to do so. However, we totally understand that not everyone has the funds to support us. Thankfully, there are many non-monetary and important ways to help us. Tell a friend about the show. Really, one of the best ways to support us is to spread the word to people you know. Commenting on our posts, either on the website, Facebook, Twitter, or the Board Game Geek Guild, are very helpful for us to know what listeners think and want from our show. If you think of anyone you'd like us to interview, please let us know. We'd also appreciate any shares of our posts on social media. Take pics of you playing games and post them to any of our social media avenues. We'd love to know what you're playing and maybe take a look at playing those games too. Please call our voicemail number at 916-426-2873 and leave a message or a show intro or promo. For example, you could say, "This is Sarah and it's our turn," or "This is Sarah and you're listening to Our Turn Women on Gaming." Of course, replace Sarah with your name. So there's many ways to support us, and we'd appreciate any and all of them. Thanks for listening.
All right, so now we're getting to the end of the episode, and we're looking forward to what we've got on our plates in the next couple of weeks. Mark, what have you got on your plate?
Well, the first thing I have on my plate is I actually have a job interview.
Yay!
Of course, I'm not going to disclose who it's with. That's just, tacky. But I finally am starting to make some progress in this job hunt. And I hope, beyond hope, that I can hit it off with this company because it sounds like they'd be a real good fit for me. So all of you R-turners out there, please keep a good thought for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing I'm looking forward to is, believe it or not, on the Friday that is my birthday this year is the opening day of one of our local conventions, Conquest. And I'm definitely looking forward to doing some serious gaming over my birthday weekend.
Yay. It's always fun when cons fall on your birthday weekend.
Yeah, and since I am, well, some people say I'm 59. I say I'm 25 plus shipping and handling. And so, it's getting to the point where I'm starting to maybe qualify for the senior discount. Ugh. Getting old ain't for sissies, people, let me tell you.
Yay, money savings.
Yeah, I love you too, dear. So what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to Conquest. A year or two ago, it fell on my birthday weekend, and I had a great time that whole weekend. And then I am also participating in a community emergency rescue team training or CERT training with my friend Yuriko. Hi, Yuriko. And that is a local thing through the Sacramento Fire Department. They bring in volunteers. They train them in helping out in emergency situations like earthquakes, fires, storms, things like that. We're not taking the place of professional firefighters and police and EMTs, but we're helping. So the idea is to train us in how to use fire extinguishers in an emergency, how to evaluate the condition of a building. Is it safe to go inside? How to do some very minor first aid to, stabilize someone and evaluate their condition until first responders can get there. Things like that. This coming Saturday, I have fire suppression, search and rescue training. It's an all-day thing on Saturday. And then the classes are Tuesday nights and Saturday, all day on Saturdays through March 24th. So it's going to overlap with Conquest. I'm going to miss the Saturday of Conquest, but I'll be there Friday and Sunday. And I'll be there Saturday night. Saturday is our graduation test. So we get to go through a simulated building disaster and get tested on what we've learned. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And then just prior to that graduation, the Department of Homeland Security is having some sort of drill. And if we make it through all 5 classes prior to the graduation test, we're eligible to participate in that simulation as victims. So I think that's going to be fun. I'm going to sign up to do that too. And it's like an 8-hour shift, and you get all made up with, head wounds or, makeup to simulate injuries. And then you lay there and while the real first responders evaluate you. It's a simulation for federal, state, and local first responders to practice their disaster skills in. And I think it sounds like an incredible experience to go through. So I'm looking forward to that. All right. So Mark, how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you online?
Well, if you want to get with me on Twitter, I am at The Amused Geek, all one word. You can also hit me up if you contact us through the R-Turn Facebook page or the R-Turn Guild on Board Game Geek.
That's right. That's guild number 2600. And you can reach out to me on Twitter as well. I run the Our Turn Podcast Twitter handle, which is at Our Turn Podcast. You can also reach out. You can connect with Sarah through our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/OurTurnPodcast. And then our website URL and show notes can be found at www.ourturnpodcast.com. And the show notes for this episode are going to be at /episode 70. So, all right. So thanks for joining me, Mark. This is fun.
I love doing this show with you, Cathy. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. And so until next time, on behalf of the entire Our Turn podcast crew, that was our turn.
And now it's yours.
Thank you for listening. This episode was recorded on March 8th, 2018, and is written and produced by Cathy and Mark Ford with assistance from Leslie Loy and John Cleaveland. We want and encourage your questions, comments, and feedback. Please call 916-426-2873 and leave us a short voicemail or send an email to feedback@ourturnpodcast.com. Our theme music was composed by Adriana Crickle. Incidental music was provided by Ben Sound. Please check out our show notes to learn more about these talented artists. The material in this episode is copyrighted under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. If you want to learn more about the games discussed in this episode, please visit our website at ourturnpodcast.com/episode 70. You can find a list of the games along with links to their listing on BoardGameGeek.com. We are proud members of the Dice Tower Network. You can find out about other shows in the network like The Dice Tower, Flip Flory's Super Saturday Board Game Serial, or the Board Game Design Lab by going to dicetowernetwork.com. Thank you for your support. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about us.